Well, hello to you all once again, and thanks for returning to Classic Dirt Bike TV. Now, it's quite hard to imagine that it was way back in 2007 when I first started uploading my video material to YouTube, and to think that almost 15 years later I'm still doing almost exactly the same thing, although it has to be said that much of my early video material that I uploaded to YouTube wasn't the greatest, and I still get some quite critical feedback on those early videos, which to be fair have been justifiable, but this is now 2021, and thankfully we've moved on, and Classic Dirt Bike TV seems to be becoming more increasingly popular as the weeks and months go on, with now almost 3,000 videos uploaded, and we're just a few subscribers short of that 13,000 subscribers total. So thanks to each and every one of you for your continuing support over the years. Now, coming up in my channel next, we're going to take a look at a bike that I captured in the paddock at the recent Westmoreland County Showground Golden Jubilee event that was held in August of 2021. So right now we're going to take a look at Mark Beeston's lovely 1979 KX125 Kawasaki. Now, this very nice looking 1979 KX125 Kawasaki was yet another one of the bikes that I came across while I was at the two-day classic scramble event held by the Westmoreland Motor Club back in 2021. And this was their Golden Jubilee scramble that was held over the course of 2 days. And this bike here belonged to Mark Beeston. Now, Mark's bike isn't, of course, a fully original machine from 1979, as it has one or two non-original parts fitted onto it, although essentially it's still pretty much a stock bike from that particular year. Now, as I remember back in 1979, I think these KX125s were titled the A5 models, and these 125s, and of course its bigger brother, the 250, were among two of probably the best twin-shock motocrossers that Kawasaki had ever produced up to that time. Now, in terms of their overall mass, these were almost feather-light 125 motocrossers, and the all-up weight, I think, of these bikes was only around the 190 pounds mark, which was a full 13 pounds lighter than its equivalent CR125 Honda in 79. Now, of course, the heart of the little KX125 was this fantastic little power plant, which for such a small package, it certainly packed a big punch, and it could pull from right from the bottom of its rev range right to the very top, and it was very quick and quite easy to ride, although some riders did say that these bikes suffered from clunky gearboxes, which could also be a bit unreliable if they were worked very hard. Now, this engine had a 6-speed gearbox and of course the usual wet oil-cooled clutch. Now, this clutch casing on Mark's machine is of course not the proper colour for this motor, as it should be just all black like the rest of the engine, although this clutch casing appears to have undergone the now very popular Cerakote ceramic coating, which is fast becoming a big trend for riders customising their race bikes. Now, ceramic coatings are of course very hard wearing, and they say that they can withstand very high temperatures as well, but they can also add just that little bit of individuality to your specific race bike. Now, if my ageing memory serves me right, I think the cylinders on these 79 KXs had an electrofusion cylinder bore, as opposed to, of course, the old school iron affairs, which were quite heavier, and I think the motor originally would have been fed its fuel through a Boyson reed valve, which had a set of fibre petals as opposed to the older steel parts. Now, one of the other little niggles that riders used to complain about on the KX125 was that tall riders used to say that these footrests were set far too high in the frame, and it also looks like Marx substituted the original Kawasaki parts for these better, wider pegs that will certainly give the rider much more support when he's standing up or riding with his full weight on the pegs. Now, once again, the little KX125 has a replacement exhaust expansion chamber fitted, and this again, it certainly looks like it's a good quality upgrade over the 79 stock parts. But of course, original parts for these KX Green Kawasaki's are becoming quite hard to find nowadays, but I suppose if you're prepared to surf the World Wide Web on the internet, you can still find the odd green Kawasaki bits and pieces. But it's certainly no surprise again that Mark's bike has also had a replacement tailpipe fitted from Pro Circuit, which again is more than likely due to him not being able to find original 79 stock items for this bike. Now, also back in 1979, these KX125s I think would have had a set of Kayaba forks on the front end, which I think at the time gave the rider about 10 inches of travel at the front, as I remember, although these were still pretty basic forks and they had no scope for adjustment other than by removing or maybe adding air through the fork legs, or maybe even experimenting with different weights of oil. And I think I can also remember them having little cooling fins at the bottom of each fork leg, which I think never really did help to cool down the oil temperatures inside the forks. And once again, at the back end of the KX125 for 1979, I think it would have also been a set of Kayaba rear shocks, although in Mark's case here we can see that he has a pair of Maxton piggyback units fitted, which are very good and are earning quite a good reputation for their performance and reliability among classic and vintage off-roaders. Now, these gold anodized swing arms that were fitted to these Kawasaki's were very strong and almost had no flex at all under load, and although these 79 KX125s had their share of niggles like, of course, any other motocross bike of that period, then these rear suspension parts were certainly not one of them, because these Kawasaki swing arms were among some of the best in the business in the late 1970s. And again, the bike's controls with the levers, grips and cables are all replacement parts, as of course are these Renthal handlebars as well. But it is quite surprising how good Marx managed to make this bike look, because as I said, you just can't lay your hands on proper green Kawasaki parts from that late 1970s period nowadays. And I'm sure I heard Mark say to me on the day that he was sourcing parts from Australia and even beyond just to get his little KX125 looking this good. But the main thing is, of course, that we keep these older Twinshockers on the racetrack so that we can all reimagine what it was like when these machines were a common sight back in the golden era of motocross in the 1970s. But as you recall, the American legend Brad Lackey was a works rider for Kawasaki in 1979, although of course it wasn't the best of times for Brad then, as he would certainly suffer quite a few mechanical DNFs while he was riding the works Kawasaki bikes, but as you know, he then switched to Suzuki and then took the World 500 title in 1982. Although, as you've no doubt gathered, there aren't too many of these older Twinshock KXs now taking part in vintage or classic racing, and whether that's because there's not many of them around now these days, or like I said, it's getting harder to find original parts to keep them going. I don't really know if that's the case, but this example here of Mark's is certainly still a little belter of a bike, and a quite quick machine on the track as well. And in these couple of pictures here, you can see Mark on his Kawasaki taking part in the 125 class at that Westmoreland Golden Jubilee Scramble weekend back in 2021. Now, I do have some video footage from that event, so I'll leave a link in the description of the video below. But for me personally speaking, I'm not really too fussed that Mark's bike here is not a fully original stock bike from that year, because I think it's more important that we try and keep these older bikes going as long as we can, because as the years and months roll by, it will certainly become harder and harder to even catch a glimpse of these one-time iconic little race bikes. Well, there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed that quite brief walk around Mark Beeston's nice 1979 Kawasaki KX125. Now, of course, a stock bike from that year, but as I said, bits and pieces and parts for these old green Kawasaki's are becoming harder to find these days, so it's not surprising that Mark's fitted a few pattern replacement parts to his bike. But nonetheless, it's still a nice example of one of these little Twinshock Kawasaki's. Okay, coming up in my next video posting, we're going to take a look at an old British machine. Now, this bike here belongs to Cecil Pearson, and this is his old Grumph, which is basically a Greaves frame with a twin-cylinder Triumph engine fitted in the chassis. So we'll take a look at this old Grumph in my next video posting here on my channel. So of course, until the next time, everybody continue to keep safe and well when you're out there riding those old vintage race bikes, and I'm sure that we'll all get back here together quite soon again to talk about more vintage iron right here on your #1 and favourite Classic Dirt Bike TV channel.